Thank you so much, sir, for joining us on a podcast with us, and the kind of experience that you bring in with your, experience inside analytics, working with InfoEdge for a quite long, and now running your own venture. I think a lot of the audience who will be watching this podcast, who are interested in analytics or are leaders in the analytics space, will get a lot of insights from here. So why not start it with your introduction, sir? Maybe for the initial 1 minute, your experience so far in the industry, the companies in which you have worked in, and your contributions.
Actually, thank you. So I started off around 20 years ago. InfoEdge was my first job, almost my first job. Before that, I had done some internship and so on. InfoEdge is where I learned everything on the job. So I did not have any formal training in analytics, even search, anything. It was a very small company when I joined, a very small team. And by the time I left around 11 years while at InfoEdge, it was quite a huge team. InfoEdge provided me this playground to test ideas. I mean, there was tremendous freedom. It's a wonderful company, tremendous freedom to play with ideas, bring in new technologies. Because when we started off, and I'm talking 20 years ago, we did not have much support in the ecosystem, even for basics like search. Because there were a few APIs like you've seen and all, but everything we had to build from scratch. So InfoEdge was a great journey. After InfoEdge, I joined this company called Final Mile Analytics. Final Mile was later acquired by Fractal. Is a behavioral design firm. So the idea being, bring in. So when we talk about behavior change in analytics, why not look at it from first principles? So if you don't understand how decision making happens, how human behavior impacts decision making, we're missing a big piece of the puzzle. So that was my hypothesis when I joined Panel Mile, and it was later validated when Fractal Analytics, as you might know, is an analytics company which acquired Final Mile for the same thing. So there it was learning on human decision making from first principles. A lot of interesting projects, some tech, some even non-tech, just looking at design. Okay. So today I could say not just technology, even from a product design standpoint, behavioral principles could be a huge input to decide or to influence that decisions while you're designing the product. After Final Mile, around 4 years ago, I started my own journey as an entrepreneur. And the first one was an AgriTech startup. So AgriTech, I mean, we had to close that down after a year and a half. It didn't work out. But that gave me good exposure to the AgriTech and dairy industry. So right now we're also working in parallel on a stealth project for dairy farming, IoTs and so on. But the current venture that I'm, full-time involved with is a fintech startup. So this is a project actually had started as a hobby while at Final Mile to manage my own equity investments. That became quite big, that became quite successful. And I was getting a lot of, uh, offers from people that why don't you start your own, product on this idea. And that's when after a lot of, due diligence, getting, what the legal landscape and the guidelines around the fintech startup of equity. Finally, we started it. It's just a 1 year old startup. We are still in beta mode, a small beta group of around 50 people, even though we started off with the idea was, 10 or 15 beta users, but that went. So that's the current journey so far. Anything else?
So the first, thing that I would like to take your insights on is related to this itself, sir. Is that tell tell our audience a bit about how behavioral sciences and analytics can be combined with AI. To help the users, because you have been implementing the use cases. If you can explain us in a very layman terms, how this entire thing basically works.
That's a brilliant question, and to honestly answer that question is a I mean it's a long drawn. But let me attempt. First of all, so the moment we talk about even in analytics, most of the projects are driven by changing behaviors. So taking examples from let's say credit card risk, we're trying to change behavior towards prudent credit usage of cards and so on. And that was the project we did at Final Mile. So when you're talking about managing behaviors, obviously there is a lot of data that's available, and we tend, as analytics people, we need tend to think the data contains most of the information that we need to figure out how that behavior works, how to change that behavior. But the moment you, because it's the problem of what we know, but what we do not know is something we do not know, right? So the moment you look at behavioral science, you realize there is this entire uh, sort of factors which have been completely overlooked in this domain. And the moment you start to bring, and mind you, when I say behavioral science, it's not a very easy, because most of the data is not available. For instance, when you're talking about tracking behavior, credit card behavior, purchase behavior, that's digitized, available in the form of, decisions people take. But getting there, what was going on in their head when they took a particular decision is, that data is completely and absolutely not available, because the systems had not been planned or designed in a fashion to even consider or bring in those data. So that was a big challenge at Final Mile, trying to get what's going on in your head, in the person's head, when they are trying to weigh between different options, whether to buy this, that, whether to roll on their credit card debt, and so on. So that's one, I would say, a challenge and an opportunity where behavioral science brings to the table, to be able at least to digitally look at that data, number one. And first of all, and secondly, once you have that data, to be able to make sense out of it and actually change behavior. And most of the time you find that changing behavior is quite simple if you have got your hands on that levers. So once you understand that, because most of these decisions are split second and it happens quite automatically, so there is an algorithm somewhere, even in our heads, in the decision maker's head. So that's one area where this marriage of behavioral finance, behavioral science, and analytics, this it needs to happen. And it's happening at pockets. And that has been even our attempt in this decision making of financial fintech equity investment.
So I will try to get deeper into this. And the way you explained it looked very easy, but how do you make sure that, what are those techniques which are most effective in detecting and influencing behavioral biases when it comes to financial decision making? Maybe if you can take a few examples to explain us.
And this is one of the closest examples to my heart. So equity investments, for instance. Yeah. So the moment you talk about equity investments, let's start off with the background here. So many people avoid equity investments because there is this, fear that it's going to be harmful for a lot of people. And there's this entire class of people who get into equity investments because they want to, they're looking for quick returns. So we have this completely, two opposite sides of this coin, where there is a selection of a class of people who want quick returns. And then there is an entire set of people who are completely, staying away from the equity markets and not trying to, because of the stories they've heard around it. Now, when we studied this problem, when we looked at this problem, the problem was, why do people lose money in the stock market? Is it that people do not know what's the and how to conduct themselves in the stock market? Now, what we said is, or what we found out is, it's not a problem of information or knowledge. Now, anybody who is planning to, let's say, start the equity investment journey, obviously they would have read at least a book or even a couple of articles by some of the great investors, Warren Buffett, Benjamin Graham, and so on. So anybody who is getting into that, or even trying to dip their feet into the equity investments landscape, they would be prepared with the basics. Like, yeah. So if I ask anybody in the cold state, now how should you invest in the stock market? Most of them would, when they're nicely seated and we call this a cold state. So the cold state answer would be the textbook, buy low, sell high. So everyone knows that, if you buy low and only if you are able to sell it at a higher price, you're able to, and there's no way that can go wrong, right? And that's obviously, provided the company that you have invested in is fundamentally sound. Yeah. So that being the basics. Now, what happens in the stock market is this behavior is completely flipped around. So think of it or look at it this way: how it happens. Everyone says you buy low and sell high. Now, what happens is when the markets are at the peak, there is this sort of greed, what we also call FOMO, the fear of missing out. So let's say a person has invested a particular sum and he's been talking about that particular investment to his colleagues and friends and family. At some point, let's say people were staying away, but at some point you start to feel that, oh, am I missing out on something? Because this investment started at X, it's already at 1.5x, and the story is that it will go up to 5x or something. So let me get on the bus. And the moment you get on that bus is when, this downturn. I mean, there are stories people tell you the moment I got into it and then this downtrend happens. Now look at what has happened here. Everyone says buy low, but here when it was on the climb, the uptrend is when people, start to pile on. The exact reversal happens when the markets are crashing. The market, let's say, invested at X, it went up to 2X, and then it comes down to even X and even further to half of X of what you had invested. I mean, you start to, judge or doubt your own judgment. Did I make this decision correctly? This information that I received from research, was it even, correct? And therefore, at the lowest peak, at the lowest bottom, people out of panic, out of fear is when they exit the stock market or at least dump that particular stock. So what happened here was this behavior, the cold state behavior, which they had stated themselves stated is completely reversed in the hot state. So in the hot state of the stock market, when emotions run very high, this behavior gets completely flipped on its head. And this is one problem that we had studied deeply, and the company that I'm working on is actually to manage that behavior. We've been successful to a great extent. I won't say completely, but we've been highly successful. The data on, at least 50, so even though it's anecdotal, still I would say, of 50 users, and some of them doing, building their portfolio slow and steady. But I can see the green shoot. And even before that, so I've been using the product for more than, 7 years, even before I started this. So it does change your behavior. And one thing I'll add here is even, I consider myself a behavioral student, as a student. So even knowing all this, when the market throws it's impossible for anybody to not react to it. So emotions will. So even for us or anybody who even a seasoned investor, it will be there. But keeping those emotions in check, having those guardrails, your safety nets, your risk management processes in place is paramount. So that's one example where we have seen this work. Hope I've been able to answer your this thing.
Absolutely, sir. And what I feel is that, once if, this is gonna get successful, it will also engage a lot more people to invest in the stock markets, and that entire capital, should rise, because you're absolutely right. Nobody's guiding us on that aspect. Nobody's actually helping us from the behavioral aspect of the things. Now I will take you back to your info age, kind of tenure, and I can see that, sir, you have been a behavioralist transformed into analytics, and that is one of the reasons why you have been able to do that well, because you are very much interested to understand the behavior of the users, how do they behave. So I'll ask a question on that, sir. Like, during your instant at that company, what were the main challenges that you felt were solved with the help of analytics? We don't need to specify any specific names or something, but we just want to discuss around the challenges and how they were solved, by your team, using the power of analytics and data driven,
Question. Let's comment on what you just mentioned, and that's interesting. Why people stay away and how this will help. So there is this. If you have been, following stock market landscape, there's been a couple of studies even by SEBI, which says 91% of the investors in the stock market they lose money. It has been validated. Uh, and it has also been found most of these investors are the short-term traders, FNOs. So that's one area which is quite dangerous. And just to add this caveat, I thought it's important to mention this. We completely stay away from that, because that's, and you might have heard of, the recent what's been happening with other players. So let's not take names here till it's at least, finalized. But if you're trying to pit yourself against one of these big players, it's a lost game. So my suggestion, or anybody I speak to, is stay away from these things that we do not understand, and it's completely impossible to take head on these big players with all those resources. So stick to the long term investment philosophies and then build your portfolio. So there's no magic pill in the stock market. Slow and steady. You just need a process. Everyone needs a process and some handholding to get that started. And that's how it has been for me. Now, sorry for the digression. And now coming to your, the question on how has been the growth at InfoEdge and some of the challenges. So yeah, I mean, so when I started off, as I said, when we started off at InfoEdge, Even the search engines that we're using were not up to the mark. So I had a fantastic team, and we built everything from scratch, from first principles. And obviously there were some open source libraries that we used, Lucene, Sphinx, and so on. But most of the heavy lifting, the grunt work was done by this amazing team that I had. Okay. Obviously, and towards the later part of it, there were other solutions, solar and other things that came up. But during the initial journeys, even many years into the IPO of the company, also it was a homegrown system, and we took great pride in that. Now, to give you a couple of examples, like where how this search has been, without taking anything specifics. So this was one topic, even anywhere, because at that point of time, the only parallel we could think of, or somebody we could emulate, was Google. So we considered Google the benchmark, and we'd also, whenever we had a problem, we would think, okay, how would Google have done this? And trying to, brainstorm our way into a solution. So one of the challenges at that point of time was, so we had these two databases, the job seekers and even the recruiters databases. So this problem was of finding the context. So because obviously there are different types of users of the product, some quite advanced users and then some not so advanced users, right? So advanced users could find a way around, the database, with whatever search we had. But then there was this entire set of users who were not that savvy. So a lot of our time was also spent at looking at that data, like what are the users doing? And from there, we had this insight that we need to look at context. So sometime, to give you an idea, as simple as, let's say you're searching for a job on CEO, for instance. And if you look at just the basic search at that point of time, you would get results even, secretary to CEO and so forth, because it's a keyword match. So you need to step back, or even your systems need to step back and think, okay, it's not a search for a secretary. Obviously, the word CEO exists in that, but you now need to look at the context. Who is the searcher? What's he trying to find out? And that's where this entire journey of analytics. So AI, at that time, we didn't even know that we were playing an AI analytics. I mean, we were trying to solve a problem the brute force way. And on the way, we obviously did discover a lot of things, which again got validated from the industry and so on. But that's how the search evolved. Then there were other products around, similarity. So once you have a job or a resume which a user has shown interest, then figuring out all the neighborhoods of that job or resume. So you would find, similar documents and then different ways. So that solves a lot for the context, solves a lot also for the intent. What is the intent of the searcher, the user? And yeah, and obviously these were challenging problems with the amount of data that we had in the processing and even the real-time requirement of those.
This is good, sir. Now I will kind of go to campaign analytics, because a lot of analytics is also involved around optimizing the content and helping users find out relevant content, Google or on different channels. And I see that you have also worked on search indexing and related concepts. So would you like to throw some insights on the applications of analytics there?
When you say content analytics, okay, I mean, if you're talking about, just search, as in, document matching.
Yes.
So I mean, the basics when you do it on any search indexing is what we call these two metrics of, number one is the recall and then the relevance. So one is finding out whether a document exists, or if there exists a document, are we able to find that particular thing? And then the second one is of relevance, where if you are able to if you were able to find that. So the closest example, if you it's already available, so I can speak about it, is for instance, the PageRank Google. I mean, this was quite an old technology, but the relevance of a document, how closely or relevant other users found it, that was one measure of the this thing. I'm not sure if I'm getting into your exact question on the content analytics, but that's what I know. So in marketing, I won't have much to add on that particular thing.
Got it. So I'll kind of, go back to, this domain of behavioral sciences, sir. And, since you have picked up one industry, which is investments. So what do you think about the other industries? Like what are the applications of behavioral sciences with analytics in the other industries, which may be similar or not similar to where you are working at?
So behavioral sciences, I mean, the mother of all statements is wherever there is behavior, behavioral science is going to work. And wherever there are people, there would be behavior. So if you take that statement, it sort of covers the entire gamut. So whether it's safety, health, medical adherence, whether you take credit card, in fintech, it's top to bottom. Financial decision making exists everywhere. Education, that's a very right one. Road safety, we had done tremendous. So it was not a very tech project at that point of time, but road safety, and these are project, mind you, I'm telling you, like, sometimes you feel so proud and blessed to have worked on those where you're able to save lives. So our company had done a project with the railways that became a flagship project for Final Mile. So if you look it up sometime, so that was around saving lives of people trying to cross railway tracks, and how behavioral science was able to solve that quite well. So
Got
the examples are tremendous. So it would take me hours to, but just to give you a sense, these were everywhere. Anywhere there's human behavior, you will find application for this.
absolutely. And healthcare and education are also very relevant industries where I think a lot of this concept can be applicable. And also, from the perspective of banking and, risk, market risk, analytics and credit risk as well. There's a lot of a scope of the use of behavioral sciences clubbed with analytics. And I think you have worked on a few projects, in your last instant on this as well.
So I've been, not sometimes directly, sometimes as a part of the support team, but been sort of involved with, or at least have some knowledge. So there was this project, this flagship project, even the government of India, Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan. That was one project our team had studied and helped to design. So wherever there is financial decision making, you know, to trying to bring in the uh, unbanked and completely unbanked sector or class of people into the banking fold was a tough this thing. Different people have different mental models, how they work around it. So for us, banking is second nature. But for somebody who has spent a large part of their adult life not being in the formal banking sector, suddenly you're getting them into in the banking is was a slight challenge, and I think it was a great project that was done well, and because it helped also us as a country and the economy during COVID and other times. Banking is one area, as you mentioned. Credit card risk is a behavior, uh, or risk in any other credit system that needs to be, uh, because otherwise people will get into debt, and
Yeah,
obviously it's not good for the company itself. So there's only so much as a company trying to improve their credit uptake. So knowing exactly that tipping point beyond which, or even close to that is something. So knowing those levers, knowing those parameters is important.
absolutely. Now, in this last segment of the podcast, we will kind of discuss a few things about leaderships. And since you have been one of the initial members, inside InfoEdge, when this entire concept of analytics would have started, how did you build your team? What were the first set of things that you did right, which worked out well? And how did you scale the team? What were the challenges that you faced? What were the risk factors involved? Would like to hear your insights on that.
Yeah. So as I said, it's Info is a fantastic place, was and is a fantastic place. And I was lucky to have great managers. And so, as I said, everything was on the job for me. I learned everything on the job. So, looking at your seniors is what inculcated. For instance, even this search engine, that was when I joined. We were evaluating other search engines to sort of see which would work. I just proposed to my manager that if given the chance, we could build our own, and obviously he trusted me and they trusted in the team. So I got a good team. The team put in their effort. We were able to build it. So that's where, how it percolates. So your managers are trusting, they give you a lot of freedom. And I followed that. So once we have the right people, full freedom to test out, try out ideas. Some of them will work, some of them not. I mean, it's bound to fail. That's how, these things work. But you pick up your learning. So nothing is a failure there. So you pick up your learnings uh, from so-called failures, which is going to be the next part of your success. Full motivated, devoted team, at least to the thing, and that's how it happened. So yeah, that's exactly what happened. So I won't say there was any special effort on that. That's how it was a team effort got good people on both sides
How do you
reporting.
get these requirements? Like, suppose you get an idea about that you have to apply analytics on this sort of a data, and so it becomes very important to have a cross-linked culture where the sales team, marketing team, and every team is communicating with your team. That part of the thing, which is quite challenging.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think you touched on a very important. So it's not just my team or our team, that was the engineering team. So the entire team, the product team. So even my, experience or understanding of product has evolved because of the great product managers, and they worked as a team. So once you're on a project, so one of the great things about these companies is you're looking at the outcomes at the project. So it's not about, just the deliverables of the engineering team or the design or the product. You have a mandate or you have a responsibility towards your users. uh, Make it work. You can't, pass it on that, okay, I've done my this thing and then it's for that. I mean, if you look, so it becomes much simpler if your objectives are all aligned. And here in those cases, we had our objectives aligned towards the users, the job seeker in those cases, or the recruiters. Even at Final Mile and things, the users of that particular solution. So once those things are aligned, these differences, different teams, so to speak, because there are different skills that are, and those communications do happen. And I was lucky to have, participated in a lot of those discussions. And that is what which has evolved, even today when I look at my journey on starting this product. Obviously, engineering is an important piece of it, but just the product design, making it work for our users is because of certain learnings that have happened at those stages. And these things stay back. Technologies, tools, they would, appear and disappear, uh, so to speak. But some of these basics tend to stay back, stay all the time.
Absolutely, sir. And thank you so much for, sharing all these insights. I think we touched upon a lot of things, starting from what you're doing right now to your experience at InfoEdge. And also we discussed about other industry use cases of analytics and behavioral sciences. I hope this podcast is going to be useful to a lot of people, even from other industries who want to get some insights on how you are using behavioral science and analytics in your existing, startup or company. Thanks so much for joining us, sir. And I will be in touch with you, and we look forward to getting your guidance as well.
Thank you so much. And yes, really hope, it's helpful to people, and wish you all the best.
Thank you.